Hello, everyone, to the Space Syntax Lab seminar. Today, I'd like to welcome Susie Chen. She is a researcher who completed her PhD at the TU Darmstadt in 2021, where she studied the environmental factors that affect the physical activity of refugee children in Berlin, using both qualitative and quantitative methods. Her research focuses on user behavior-oriented design for minority groups, primarily children, elders, and other marginalized populations. And her doctoral dissertation was nominated for the 2023 Kurt Ruth Prize in Germany. And she was also a keynote speaker at the 10th Child in the City World Conference. Currently, she teaches at the Shanghai Institute of Technology and conducts research on the built environment and playing behaviors of multiracial children in rural Tibet, as well as child-friendly hospital designs. Today, she will talk about refugee children's access to play in and around their refugee accommodation. And before we start, I'd like to emphasize if there are questions during the presentation, please put them in the chat so we can address them at the very end. And with this, I'd like to hand over to you, Susie. The floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you, Cameron, for the introduction, and a pleasant afternoon to you all. But in Shanghai, it's already midnight. So if there are also people from China, like good evening. Today, I will share part of my research experience among us as exploring the methodological approach in a challenging environment. Maybe for some of us very experienced researchers, you can think of the challenge as unstable or temporary. I will discuss how we investigated refugee children's access to play in and around their refugee accommodations, and you will see how we attempt to approach refugee children's perceptions of playing accessibility from some aspect. And the presentation will begin with the qualitative and quantitative data collection through the socio-spatial frameworks of refugee accommodations in Berlin. Next, and we will talk about the concept and terms raised from refugee children's perspective and into architecture investigation, and then to our technical attempts to link perceived findings to architectural representations from different environmental levels. The limitation will be discussed along with the research and at the end. The literature review has been done concerning built environmental attributes associated with refugee children's physical activity, or what we simplified as playing. We found the importance of accessibility to formal playing space for refugee children. The formal playing space, we defined it as a place designed for the purpose of play. It's also indicated the potential of deepening this direction. And first, we defined the research scopes by dividing the built environment into 3 layers with Brinfenbrinder's theory. The micro environment is the immediate vicinity of their accommodation that structures refugee children's daily contact. Examples include the refugee campaigns as internal space and a designated playground as external space. The meso-environment is the border neighborhood, including street and open spaces. The micro-environment involved large-scale urban environments, such as access to transportation systems. In this presentation, we will mainly talk about micro and meso-environment. And here comes our main questions. What are the perceptions of access to play for refugee children? Moreover, how they perceive playing accessibility. And we try to approach this with a 3-step qualitative research design, including like parents and children's questionnaire, children's workshop, and we provided the refugee children with cameras to help them to document their daily playing lives. And this part has been done in one temporary accommodations. which we call initial receptions. And I will explain what is initial receptions later. We have in this initial receptions, families usually stay here from 3 months to 6 months, and we have done the research with 10 refugee families and 50 children. Of course, they are newcomers, so none of them indicated like a neighborhood playing space as often go. And if you ask the children to draw the features of the playing space they perceived, for example, you ask them like, where did they play, with which equipment they played, or what their perceptions of the playing space. Even though you can see on the right side, they have a fully equipment playground inside their accommodations with slate, with swigs, and with sand playground, but only 3 children really draw this equipment. And 2 children said that they have no playing space in the neighborhood and they need transportations for outdoor playing. Many of the drawing sketches that the sketches like flowers, also the trees, for their playing, they identify their playing in these informal spaces. As an overview, few children have no image of micro environments, even though they have like fully equipment playground, only few children draw it. And in the meso-environment, children have no impressions of this formal playing space as we talked before, and most of them draw grassland as the informal spaces. And this diagram summarizes from a parent's perspective. And most parents thought there were no accessible space for their children's playing in micro environments, so as in meso. Moreover, parents were always worried or unsure about neighborhood safety because they did not go out very often. And why the parents' perspective are so important, because we have also done the staff survey with 6 accommodations. The staff always said that since of their the neighborhood is unsafe to them, so the children's playing are always under supervision with their parents. So most of the children's, like their neighborhood is decided by their parents' perspective. So it's very important you also include the parents' perspective. And these are the photos taken by the children. It shows us a similar result. Also, I can give a short introduction of how we organize these photos. We provided the children with the camera. They take the photos by themselves, and we printed like all the photos. So we have these playable workshops, and we build this board with the children together. And they show us, they tell us the story of each photos, and they put different mode tags of their feelings of the photos. And here are the key findings of the qualitative approach. And with these findings, several very interesting themes emerged. First is that the refugee children indicated informal space for their playing, which means we define it as urban space that are readily and freely available to them. They used informal space as their playing space and treat them equally to formal. And I could provide you with some image here. Why should we investigate informal space, and why formal space somehow not so accessible to them? For all of the refugee children's, for all of the refugee accommodations we investigated, they are located in very undeveloped area of the cities, which means there may be not enough playing space exist, or the neighborhood are perceived as unsafety for these refugee families, which we already talked before. Also, for some of the existing programs in the playing facilities, maybe the refugee families, they can hardly afford that. Moreover, the existing formal facilities maybe not accessible for these refugee families if they failed to respond to their cultural sensibilities. I could summarize an example from our architectural views. You can see this is an example of the swimming pools in Berlin. There is like one entrance for both girls and boys, even though they have like changing room, separate changing rooms, but they have no like gender, like no separated gender distributions. For this kind of design, is maybe somehow not acceptable for the for the children from Muslim countries of origin. And I have a possible solution maybe on the right side that shows if you have like very like separate entrance and you have very strict rules for the gender distributions for this kind of design, is maybe more acceptable for the refugee families. Another theme is that parents and children, they really paid less attention to the existing quality of the playing area. For example, the size, the equipment. And I think it's very easy for us to understand, since most of us, maybe we are not in our hometown, maybe we are studying abroad. So if you go to the playground, the play equipment forms somehow is different from your countries of origin. For these refugee families, they are newcomers and they are not familiar with the equipment in the host countries as Germany. They care more about whether the space were accessible for them or for their children's playing purpose, but not about the, the quality of the space. And these findings also lead our directions of what we should investigate as access to play in micro and meso environments, and how we investigated the quantitative data as we measured playing space accessibility. In micro environments, it means that we investigated their living unit accessibility to the playing room inside the accommodation, or to the playground designated by the refugee accommodation. In meso environment, it refers to the access to formal and informal play space from their refugee accommodation. And here we goes to the micro environment. I will have a brief introduction to the refugee accommodation systems in Berlin. After asylum application, refugee families live in the nearest available accommodation. They will then be distributed into the initial receptions as we investigated before. The initial receptions called Erstaufnahmeeinrichtung in German, and this is almost their first station in Germany. After evaluation, most families goes to community accommodation, which we call Gemeinschaftsunterkunft in German. Moreover, there are new types of refugee accommodations to coupling with the inadequate living situation. One is residential containers called temple homes. Another is prefabric concrete models, namely modular refugee accommodation. I will show you detailed examples of initial receptions, temple homes, and community accommodations. For the initial receptions, A, B, and C, most of them were admitted in existing buildings, and families supposed to stay here from 3 to 6 months. For the accommodation D, temple homes, it was a one-floor residential containers where refugee families have short-term stay. It's very interesting type because it's the temporary of the temporary. For example, maybe there's not enough initial receptions, then the families will be settled in the temple homes. Also, if they have visa problems, they will be settled in this temple home. So it's very unsure how long will they stay in these temple homes. Also, accommodation F have a similar container structures. And E is a formal retirement home. E and F were both community accommodations. Families were expected to stay here for at least 2 years. And I think there is a rule to like how the difference between the initial receptions and community accommodation is that initial receptions, they have served meals, they have buffet, and for the community accommodation, most of them have kitchens because the families stay here longer. And for all of the accommodation we investigated, there is one thing in common, is that all of the refugee accommodations, they have flexible and temporary living unit. I will explain more later. And here are the basic spatial parameters across 6 case studies. Most of them have 20 to 30 children. They are mainly from Muslim countries of origin. I could give you a short introduction of how this, like where should the children from in the refugee accommodations, like they will have a equal distribution. So for each accommodation, they only accepted for one country, like 2 or 3 families. But there may be 2 families from Iran, 2 families from Iraq. They are both Muslim countries of origin, so they share the similar language. They can, so almost most of the refugee accommodations for the majority, they are from like Muslim countries of origin because it's a larger union. Also, if you see the existing period, you can find that most of them, they have really short period of existence and they're already closed until now. And I believe some technical issues may have already appeared during our discussion, and all the children we investigated were in transit period with temporary living units. And I can have explanations here. For example, if you're like one family is in accommodation A, you may enter the country or arrive in this accommodation with 3 family members, but after like 1 week, there's more family members join. So you may first live in level 2 in a 3-person unit. Then you may move to like 5th floor with a 6-person living unit. But also for the accommodation A and C, they have like reconstruction. So there is a connected door between the different units. So you may still in the same room, but there's more family member joins, and you just open the door to join these 2 living units together and become a 6-person unit. And the one who lives next to you before they move to another floor. And for the accommodation D and F, I think it's very easy to understand. They have like a container unit. So if there's more family member joins, you just from 1 container to 2 container, you just extend the container to 3. And for the accommodation B and E, they used to be the healthy facilities. Just you can think of their space like when you go to the exhibitions, they're more like the museum space. So they all, even though they are structured like this, for the living unit inside, they have very temporary living units, temporary walls. And if there are more family members come, they just put new bed and extend the temporary wall to make the space larger. They are all like this kind of temporary structures. And also there's another issue. What we are talking about here is that what we are discussing is an under-researched area. There was a lack of commonly accepted definitions for the playing environment quality for refugee children, or like we don't have a method or a tool or a questionnaire sample that can be used for its quantitative or qualitative assessment. And for all of these reasons, we decided to choose a 4-person living unit as 2 parents and 2 children for the minimum spatial evaluation, since it was the most common types based on all the staff survey. And we used accessibility graph to express an analysis different in spatial models by reconstructing and positioning a specific place, which means the playing space, at the starting point, which means the living unit we just identified before. Below are the examples of different technique. For the R graph, we can see it shows, it could really good shows the relationship between different space, but it's not showing the space in scale. For the deep map, I think all of us are very familiar with this, but it's more suitable if you are investigated a space with a very clear boundaries and you investigated like what happens inside the space. But for our investigation, since we investigated like very temporary unit, and we want to do a comparable studies between 6 units, so we choose the third method. We choose the third technique. It's since we try to investigate the relationship network between different space, and the accessible graph was obtained by syntactic. It's a paragraph, it's a plugin for grasshopper coding in Reno 6 environment. We also have a little bit optimizations, and also the different, we want our paragraph to be readable. So it's the lines shows if the space was drawn or not, and the different colors show the different like function zones. Also, the size of the circle represents the real area size in scale. And this is a diagram shows the average step deep examples from the living unit to initial and external plane space and its typology. From this paragraph, I think we can already tell, like for the refugee accommodation with the similar typologies, they also have the similar patterns of average step deep. Like for the A and C, they are both like high-risk buildings. It's in our paragraph, it's a little bit hard for the children to get to the playing space. And for also, it's most easy is the 2 container buildings. And findings of 6 study sites show us some similarity with typologies. And the space syntax analysis, you know, the space syntax method we applied in the micro environment is quite basic and simple, but it's very effective. I think it shows the potential of these tools in this direction. And also, you know, in this like more comprehensive analysis, you can see the one with the similar typologies. They also have similar analysis patterns. Like this is the 2 I talked, like more like exhibition rooms, and they have temporary space inside. And this is the 2 containers. They all have like similar patterns. Comparatively study the existing environment for refugee children's playing is a highly complex analysis, and we have done it in a very simplified way. It's very difficult. It has difficulty using typologies to analyze spatial characteristics due to our limited samples. And we will have in the next diagram, we will have like more cases to see this problem. And we have 4 more cases, and the result highlights like 4 layout with similar spatial measures, and visualize what spatial characteristics could support refugee children's playing. It is still early for us to discuss typology, but it can work when you evaluate existing buildings for refugee accommodation purpose, if you are think of the access to play for refugee children. And remember, we have mentioned like the modular refugee accommodations before. In these new models, it attempts to provide initial like playing rooms on each floor, and also the foundings and the technique we used here supported the necessity of doing so. And then we are going to talk about the case study in meso-environment. As we just mentioned before in our qualitative research, that children and their parents paid more attention to accessibility of space in meso-environments. So we have set a 3-step investigations design grounded in this. And first, we investigated potential playing space as all space from GIS map. We use OpenStreetMap here with map codings below. It's both formal playing space and informal playing space. The informal playing space, we only include like grassland. It's also a limitation. And also, secondly, we have done a perceived path for this from children's perspective and from parents' perspective. And if the path is under 500 meters, it's children perceived neighborhood. And if it's 500 meter to 1 kilometers, it's representing like parental neighborhood. We also have like active playing space, means accessible space located in the well-connected roads with top 20% of global integration. And we will talk about later where we choose for the like space located road. And the comparisons shows the potential playing space and both formal space and informal space. There's also an interesting theme raised from the interview. Like we mentioned, they have the interview with the staff. Only for the accommodation A, we talked before, we have access to refugee children and refugee families. For all of the other accommodation, we only interview the home manager and the children department staff, or the children volunteers. And they are the children, they are the people who just playing with the children every day, so they know the conditions of the refugee children very well. It's also like staff from 5 sites. They also, if you ask them, you provided them with a map, you ask them where did children playing every day. They also indicated like open space or grassland as playing space. Also from their perspective, there's no difference of these two spaces. And this shows the potential playing space. And for the accessible playing space, we have done a lot of attempts to include refugee children's environmental perceptions from above mentioned qualitative findings in our like mass calculation. For example, if you're like working in the real map, it's very hard for you to follow the direct 90 degrees or follow the really shortest path. So we choose something in between. Also, we have seen there are several times we mentioned about the refugee family and children's safety concerns. So we assume that all the children follows the original ways and no shortcut allowed. And also for the destination choice, it's in the perceptions, how you perceive a space or how you choose this space as your playing space. It's not like B and C, you go until the end of the road and you say, oh, here I should play. It should be that you see the nearest shape point, you find a corner and you think that you just think of the space is for your playing or not. So we choose the nearest shape point to our like refugee accommodation points. We chose this shape point as the destination, and also it's we do the horizontal line, and this road is its located road. We also chose this method to include like more possible, more accessible place. qualitative. And here we have got the perceived parts and accessible playing space from both children's and parental perceived neighborhood. And then we investigated the integration of accessible space and identified the active playing space based on the deep map analysis. The integration reflects a space potential as a destination. And the interesting thing only from the analysis, only from our calculation is that most informal playing space will higher accessibility, also indicating their potentials for playing. And this is the active playing space in children's perceived neighborhood. They are compared here. Also, we have like the active playing space in parental neighborhood are compared. For this step, we also have a manually check because based on their country, based on refugee families' countries of origin. So if they're set, they're most of the children from the Muslim countries of origin, if there is formal playing space included, we will go to the set to check the map of this formal place to see if it can be included, if it could respond to the cultural sensibility of these Muslim families. And this is a diagram for the whole comparisons in meso-environments. We first this is from the staff. We also ask staff to rent in the neighborhood playing, and also we have this potential space. Then we go to investigate the road segments, and next step we comes to the accessible space. From accessible space, we goes to check the global integration of accessible place, and then we got the active place. It's like step by step. Also, we have a comprehensive patterns. We include 12 more sites, and some rules could be found if that's more active playing space could be found if they are located in residential area with no highway or railway go across, and if there are more route segments investigated. Also, this evaluation may help the decision makers for the location choice if they are going to consider refugee children's playing. And this is a comprehensive patterns of all of our investigated things. And also we ask the children to have this, we ask the staff to have this renting things. And the discussion chapters have already emerged in our previous topic, but it's still worth mentioning some things. First is that for the literature review or the material we include, it's only English language. Actually, for something in German, it should be more worth study, but we fail to include. Also, for each country, there should be more official documents include of each language to see the real condition of the refugee accommodations. Also, in the study side chapters, we didn't mention here, but we have a subjective measurement of playing, which could be hardly divided into details. For example, what proportions of children use space? How often did they use this playing space? How long did they stay here? And what behavior did they done in this space? We didn't investigate this part. And also for the environmental measures, we mentioned the reasons why we did not investigate the quality aspect. aspect of playing area, but still it somehow should be investigated. For example, the lightening, the mid-turning, also in the meso-environments, you know, the material of the road and also the stairs of the road, like what kind of trees around, we didn't investigate it, something like this. And moreover, since the research field, there is a lack of commonly acceptable definitions of what is informal spaces. So in the OpenStreetMap, we only include like grassland. Actually, the right way for us to do the things, I have saw a paper that we should go to the site to identify like every space, every like shootable open spaces. We also fail to do that. We only include like grassland from the OpenStreetMaps. And about the conclusion, in meso-environments, like in meso-environments, we have like we have points out the importance and how children recognize informal spaces as playing area. And there's still ongoing topic about neighborhood safety. And in the micro environment, we have done like accessibility measurement, which with simple inputs under our research context. And how about mention, like highlight the accessibility is very important to build environment for refugee children's playing. If you want to be more specific, they are very important for newcomer refugee children who settled in temporary refugee accommodations, not in their hometown, but in the host countries. And the results will contribute to the gaps we discussed and generate insight into refugee children's playing, which somehow under-researched before. And the analysis allows related participants to evaluate playing environment with simple input. It also will lead the informed discussion and give evidence-based design a new direction. And political makers always have like multi-location choice, and our architects always show their favors of typologies. And this kind of research may provide evidence to access evaluations better. Like finally, understanding how these themes links, researchers now have more like impractical materials and directions to study the relationship between environmental attributes associated with refugee children's playing. And given the context, we could hardly find any research regarding space syntax roles under the refugee children's context. So it seems to be a new window to begin such research. And thank you for your attention. The floor is now open for questions.